The purpose and context of this CBR study is to calculate the economic damage and disruption fires cause in warehouses without fire sprinklers in England and Wales. As a lot of people know here, the current legislation focuses on loss of life and the spread of fires elsewhere, but there's no current regulation to look after premises and contents. Such regulation would be an incentive to invest in fire sprinklers, whereas at present there's uncertainty about the benefits of doing so. Currently, therefore, there's under-provision of fire sprinklers, which implies in economic terms an inefficiency known as market failure. I'm going to come on to that a little bit later. Analysis by BRE and the excellent team there under Debbie provided the natural starting point for CBR. We used the BRE's reports, BRE reports estimates of the value of the damage caused and the distribution of the valuation of this valuation across categories of damage and by size of warehouse. But CBR went beyond the BRE report and examined non-insurable losses. So the BRE report doesn't consider damage and disruption which cannot be insured against, such as the loss of business growth, the failure to recover business after a fire, and short-term disruption to business in close proximity. So already you can see that we're moving towards the economic factors rather than the simple losses to individual businesses. So I'm going to go straight to key findings because we haven't got a lot of time. Between 2009 and 2012, there have been an annual average of 588 fires in warehouses without fire sprinklers, with the following estimated impacts. An estimated £230 million worth of damage and disruption is caused to businesses per annum, of which 144 million is uninsured and non-insurable damage and disruption. So you can't do anything about it apart from have fire sprinklers, but we're not doing anything about it. This in turn caused an annual loss to the economy of 190 million. So that's made up of what you'd expect, a good chunk of £63 million in gross value added from the reduced direct contribution of the warehousing industry to the economy, where GVA is a measure of contribution to GDP before indirect taxes, just to get the definition right. The £190 million worth of economic loss also comprises a further loss to the economy of £127 million when the industry's multiplier impacts are accounted for. So now we're into supply chain and et cetera, et cetera. That's when it really starts to hurt. So over a 5-year political cycle, being relevant to here, we estimate a cumulative loss of £1 billion in gross value added. So, £1 billion, what's that equivalent to? Well, the entire economic contribution of an entire manufacturing sector per annum, such as the soft drinks industry or weapons manufacture in the UK. You can have pro or con ideas about that, but it's pretty substantial and it brings quite a lot of tax to the country. Equivalent also to 2/3 of the economy of the city of Durham, or half the cost of rebuilding the Thames barrier to protect that thing from flooding in here. Or classically, which is the analogy used by a lot of these studies, 30 hospitals. Jobs. This loss of GVA also means job losses to the extent of 5,000 going every 5 years, where by definition one job equals a year's work. Now some of those will be replaced as new warehouses are built or factories are replaced on the damaged site, where people have given up the ghost and abandoned the idea of warehousing in the area and taken advantage to rebuild and put in other alternative sources of revenue and of employment. But up to 1,000 jobs can be permanently lost to local areas every 5 years, because simply people won't rebuild in that area sometimes. So it's permanently lost to that area. If you're in a particularly weak area, that's going to be even more punitive to you. By weak areas, we know the areas where people don't want to invest. The loss of GVA also produces losses to the Exchequer of about £32 million per year. And here I'm going to use classic analogies of equivalence. The annual average salaries of 1,300 nurses, probably more pertinently, the average annual salaries of 1,330 firefighters, which ironically is equivalent to the fire brigades of Worcester, Hereford and Berkshire. And that's per year. Environmental cost. The emission or release of 135,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide is caused by these avoidable and preventable fires, producing a negative carbon impact of a value of £7.6 million. You lump in the resource cost of the water used in firefighting and you're already up at £11 million. Now, it's not a huge amount except that it's in complete wasted carbon impact, carbon footprint. That would have translated into the carbon footprint of GVA generated by manufacturing to the value of £450 million. So you would have had £500,000 worth of manufacturing for the same carbon impact. Or a quarter of all the emissions released by vehicles throughout the entire country in an entire year sitting idling in congestion, all caused by a few preventable fires. Or the electricity consumption of Portsmouth, 72,000 households per year. So it's a waste. So in conclusion, here are our recommendations. Huge economic costs exist, which could be avoided by minimising warehousing fires, which is now becoming a platitude, I know, by this point. However, existing government sprinkler requirements only affect warehouses above 20,000 square metres, which a lot of people in this room know and are painfully aware of. But what slightly, and I'm trying not to be cross about this, because it does slightly irk you when you see things like this, which are completely anachronistic and should have been sorted out years ago, but 73% of these avoidable costs are concentrated in warehouses under 10,000 square metres. Quite a sizable chunk of distance in terms of regulation below the threshold. In Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium and France and even Spain, the thresholds range between 1,000 and 5,000 square metres. So to conclude, our three-point recommendation, which is shared by BSA, I'm sure, a government policy of increasing awareness of the benefits of fire sprinklers, government discussions with businesses as well as information sharing to enhance incentives, and finally, governments to do the obvious and review building regulations, specifically the 20,000 square metre minimum size threshold. Thank you.